Good afternoon and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Marvel Movie Talk. I'm very excited to continue our ongoing conversation about X-Men 97 and just the tremendous success that it was, the wildly popular X-Men 97. And one of the things that we set out to want to do was after the season, we were going to go back and have on all the guests who had been with us previously. And we're going to first have Laura Grafton, who is on Twitter at LL Grafton, and she's a comic scholar, avid reader, social media lover, and hippie mom. The one of those, of course, those are all important things, by the way. And I could, we could do a whole show getting hippie mom tips, but comic scholar seems like one of those things that it's like, oh my gosh, it sounds like a dream to just study comics academically. But like anything, is like, I kind of like a break from comics, but now I have to kind of do it sort of professionally.
Yeah, I joke with my friends that I ruin pop culture for everybody because I can't enjoy any of it anymore. There's always a part of me in the back of my brain that is just like, oh, but they could have done this better. Oh, I wonder what message they were sending. Oh, this is just not what I wanted to see from it. But we have fun.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure our other guest, Gina Ippolito, can relate in a way that my wife can. In that once you are, officially staffed and working as a TV writer, watching TV sometimes can be a little bit less fun because you're like, oh, I see what's happening here, or like, oh, this isn't very good. For me personally, I'm a contributor to a network called Who Are These Podcasts, and they listen to podcasts and sometimes they make fun of them. It's supposedly it's all in good fun, but so because of that, if somebody's like, oh, check out this podcast, it's either got to be great and I'll really enjoy it, or it has to be awful so that I can make fun of it as part of my job. If it's right in between, middle of the road, I'm like, I don't have any time for this. But Gina, that's just by way of a little background. So you have been a writer. The Unicorn, the Murphy Brown bunked regular show, Honest Trailers, New Rock Stars, which we spoke about a little bit last time you were on, and the G.I. Joe podcast. But I think we need to lead. As much as I want to know about your favorite sandwich, can you just take a quick moment before we dive into X-Men? Tell us about being the New Jersey Junior Women's Chess Champ.
Sure. I was 17. I learned my dad, a teacher, taught me to play chess around 2.5 years old. I played my first tournament when I was 5, lost every game. I was not good. But then slowly got good enough to become the New Jersey Junior Women's Chess Champ at age 17. I think the competition maybe wasn't that stiff that year.
So you're saying this wasn't the Queen's Gambit? This wasn't quite that story?
No. Not, there were so many more pills in my life than in the Queen's Gambit world. Just pills all day, every day.
Right, but that's why you were able to achieve the heights that you did, the meteoric rise
exactly.
to the New Jersey Junior Women. All right, what I do have to ask: what's the best sandwich you ever had?
I'm gonna go. Oh, this is okay. I'm gonna go with an easy one, which is a Taylor ham egg and cheese sandwich from Old Town Deli in Boonton, New Jersey. I'll give them a little shout out here.
Okay, yeah. So that's let's see, that's more northern New Jersey, right? Because you called it Taylor ham.
Exactly, instead of pork roll. Yeah.
This is great geography. Things for you to know, Laura, if you're ever driving through New Jersey. If they start calling it pork roll, it means you're close to Philadelphia. That's kind of
exactly
closer to New York City. It's Taylor ham. And whatever it's called, my wife hates it. She's just like, this is not good. This is not a good cut of meat, but I enjoy it. So we're gonna spend a week at a beach house outside of Atlantic City this summer, and I'm convinced that my kids are gonna become, I guess there it's pork roll. So
yeah.
All right. Well, if I could ask, I wonder which X-Man would like that sandwich the most. I feel like Wolverine could probably eat a stack of them,
Yeah, absolutely. One on each skewer, one on each. He snicks them out, and then they put the little Taylor ham, egg, and cheese rolls on each. 6 of them.
It isn't until right now, as much as I like that visual, in the DC extended universe Flash movies, he like eats a lot because he has to run so much, and I never really thought about it till this very second. Wolverine probably has to eat a lot because his healing factor is like always working. It's why he can drink so much. He probably has to have like, I don't know, 9 meals a day.
God, I would love that mutant ability.
Right? If you could just turn everything you ate into healing powers, it'd be great.
Yeah. Give it to me. That's the mutant power I want. Just the need to eat.
Any of the powers that give you the need to eat. I don't care if it's super speed or super healing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right, exactly. It's like that movie, Defending Your Life, the great Albert Brooks movie, where it's like you go to heaven and you can just eat anything you want. It's delicious and you don't have to worry about it.
It's the best version of anything you've ever eaten. Absolutely.
Right. Well, I'm fortunate enough to a couple times a year I talk to Chris Claremont, and I'm going to ask, what does his healing factor do to his appetite? And if I get an answer, I'll send the clip to both of you. But as much as I love talking about we didn't even get into Scrapple, but as much as I like talking about Taylor Ham and pork roll and Wolverine's appetite, we're here to talk about X-Men 97, the full 10 episode first season, and we spoke to each of you sort of right around the middle of the season, and I want to we're going to go into some specifics. But I want to get sort of overall feelings about the entire first season. And I'm going to ask you first, Laura, what your thoughts are now, having a couple weeks breathing room to let the dust settle, literally let the dust settle. How did you feel this first season of X-Men 97 went for you?
I have come to a place where I've really enjoyed it. I think my initial first reaction was like, I thought it was a fun time. I was a little critical. But recently I've gotten to a place where I really think they did an amazing job at representing what it looks like when you think society has leapt forward and then it starts shifting back again. And there was a lot of nuance in even things like going back to old costume styles, or even a little bit more of an older animation feel to the last episode and things like that, that just really nailed that kind of society relapsing and falling back for me. And I think with like time and space, I'm actually really, really happy with where things landed.
Oh yeah, no, I found myself very happy with it, and it was sort of doing a weekly show where every week you have to talk about what you just watched. In some cases, like less than an hour earlier, it didn't really get to breathe. Our regular panelist Nate would usually have seen it twice because he'd watch it at like midnight Pacific time, and then one more time when he got up. And it's like, oh yeah, he's really had the most time to digest it. But I think that as it goes a little further back in the rearview mirror, the more I'm like, they did an incredible job, Gina. I think the expectations were, I hope they don't tarnish the memory of the original animated series. And I think it, at least for me, I'm feeling like all they did is add to it and sort of improve upon it, because the storytelling was a little bit more sophisticated, and they didn't have the dreaded, Saturday morning network censors over their shoulders, So what are your thoughts after these first 10 episodes, Gina?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I think that right now it's among viewers, it's 100%, back up to 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I agree. It's like as close as you can get to perfection for an animated series. I mean, I loved the original too, and I rewatched all of it beforehand. But yeah, you could see the exec notes, you could see the S&P notes in that one. This one, my only complaint was I wanted more beignets. I wanted beignets I'm just gonna keep up with this theme of I enjoy food, but cartoon food especially. More beignets.
Please do. Yes. Remy knows a thing or two about great beignets. And network notes, even as a kid, it's something I noticed. And it's probably in my mind because I was reminded of your involvement with the G.I. Joe podcast. The thing that I remember about G.I. Joe as a kid, that yes, they would shoot down an airplane. There was always somebody jumping out in a parachute 100% of the time. There was never not a parachute. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They made it clear, like anytime someone was like unconscious, they were like, it's okay, he's just knocked out. Because there you could see the exec being like, what if a kid thinks that guy's dead?
Yeah, it's the same reason that the Ninja Turtles fought robots so often. Because and Wolverine too. It's like, well, you can't cut anything. Oh, but robots. Let's go ahead with that. I'd almost like to, as an exercise, somebody who's worked in that world. Can they give us a network broadcast approved for 1992 Saturday morning of episode 5 of X-Men 97? And would anyone have died?
Long. Yeah. It would be 2 minutes long.
There'd be no death in it. Yeah, just a lot of like, oh, Rogue's sad. Well, what happened?
Yeah,
Remy twisted his ankle and he's going to be elevated. It's on ice.
They just got vaporized. Don't worry, they'll be okay in an hour.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been most interested in talking to people about after this season has ended is there a character that surprised you with their arc on this season, whether it's how much we got of them? A perfect example of that is Nightcrawler. I was not expecting so much Nightcrawler. I was not expecting swashbuckling Nightcrawler, priest Nightcrawler, little bit of flirty Nightcrawler. I was just like, I didn't even know that he was going to really be in this season. So he's an example for me personally. But Laura, is there anybody that surprised you, good or bad, the way that they were portrayed throughout this season?
I was really happy with how much Nightcrawler we got. I've got a little bit of a comic book crush on him. It's great. But I think for me, I was actually surprised with how little we got of Morph overall and any kind of story arc with him. Like, he was present for a lot of things, but I didn't really feel like he contributed to the story in many ways. And I was kind of disappointed by that. I would have liked to see more.
We had a little confusion on our show about his power, which I think we came around to that he's able to approximate physical powers like, Hulk smash or morph smash, as he says, but he can't have Magneto's powers. So he's not Taskmaster. Actually, he is basically Taskmaster. He can watch and understand how to do it, but he doesn't have their abilities. I think that I agree with you that we didn't get a lot of him. But I was surprised that he always seemed to be around for some key moments, but he was the best vehicle for getting cameos into the show. A number of characters who he appeared as, who I was like, wait, are they in this episode? Oh no, that's just Morph. But Gina, what we'll circle back to Morph in a moment, but I wanted to get Gina's thoughts on who there was that you were surprised by one way or the other, how much what happened with them in this season.
Yeah, I loved how much Jubilee we got. I love that Jubilee sort of got her due and got a full episode and also we got to see her powers. And she was like, yeah, I know everyone thinks this power sucks, but watch me kick some ass. Considering in the original she felt a little bit like the OG companions from Doctor who would just sort of scream and be like, I don't know what's going on. Now she's like, yeah, now I know what's going on and I'm going to be a badass bitch. So I appreciate it.
You mean like the companions that Tom Baker would have to shout at them and bully them for them to actually do what he expected of them? And he's like, well, I was doing it because I care about you. I was like, all right. I mean, you could have just trusted her to do it. But anyway, that's not this show. That's definitely not this show. I agree with the portrayal of Jubilee this season because it is a character that I like. It's a little bit of a maligned character. I think for me, it was always like, oh, she's power set wise, she's a less cool Dazzler to me, and not even Disco Dazzler, blue suit, short hair Dazzler had sort of her powers, but amped up. And I think that they showed us actually what she could do with this. There's that moment where Bastion kind of scoffs at her, and no, she's not going to be able to have defeated Bastion by herself. But I don't think he expected to be hit as hard as he was, and the scene where, and it's that same scene, she gets her sunglasses broken. You're like, see, that's how hard she's fighting here. And I thought that was definitely impressive. And I did I can't remember if that was the episode we talked to you, but the Mojo episode where the Jubilee that was trapped in the machine or in the game basically was the previous voice actress. So I thought that was nice that we got two Jubilees, little passing of the fireworks or, donning of the yellow raincoat. And I think that I'm glad that character got featured so much. I will always selfishly complain about the fact that this show premiered in 1992 and Jubilee was part of the team. She had that role on the team. So there's never been any room for Kitty Pryde. And I'm always hoping that we're going to get to see her in some way. And we haven't yet. I think there's she showed up on a screen, somebody's screen, I think on Forge's screen, we saw like her identity. And believe me, I didn't catch that. Somebody had to tell me. So, but I think it's important to have sort of those relationships and the dynamic of Wolverine and, insert younger teammate here, whether it's Kitty, whether it's Jubilee in the Logan film, it's X-23. I said this on a recent episode, but I say it every time. If I tell someone, if there's one episode of X-Men that you're going to read to see if you enjoy the storytelling, I always say it's Uncanny X-Men 205. That's Wolverine in the snow. Lady Deathstrike is trying to get him, and he befriends Katie Power from Power Pack, which I was a huge fan of that book because I was the age appropriate for me. I was like, oh, good. It's a little safer than X-Men. It's not as scary. But anyway, so I like having those dynamics. And, Laura, as somebody who sort of really, pours over this, for enjoyment, but also a little bit analytically. What do you think about Jubilee's portrayal in these 10 episodes, which, it's sort of an unfair sample size because it's 10 episodes versus 76. But I feel like she was more involved than she was in the previous iteration of the show.
Yeah, I agree. She was much more involved than she was in the previous iteration of the show. And I also really loved how much kind of power and influence, both socially over the group, but also in terms of the way she was using her stuff that we got to see from her, and having her even like face off with Sunspot in like the battle with Magneto was really, really, really great, because Sunspot in theory overpowers her immensely, and yet she's able to go toe to toe with him and kind of bring him around to her side of things in that episode. One of my favorite character portrayals of the season by far.
Right. And I also am glad you mentioned Sunspot. That was another surprise. I had no idea that he was going to be such an important part of this series. And I was glad that we finally got to see him sort of go full Sunspot in the final episode. But I think their dynamic was good. And it kind of gave Jubilee, in TV production terms, Jubilee moved up one on the call sheet, and the new one now was Sunspot. So there was somebody to show the ropes to. And I liked their dynamic. On our panel, again, my co-host Nate was just a little disappointed that they didn't feature his father at all. But I feel like those are probably stories that are yet to be told. His mother was bad enough.
Yeah, we did need dad in there too with how mom was acting.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think that, and I use this comparison, and it's a fairly dated reference, but the way that Sunspot's mother handled basically the mutant fight coming to her front door, it's very reminiscent in the original TV miniseries V, when you have sort of the rich people who like do whatever it takes to keep the aliens happy, even though they're lizard people who are going to try and eat them and steal their water. They're like, no, just whatever, just we're the good ones, right? And I'm just like, oh yeah, so she like immediately sells out her son. And I would imagine we'll get more of that storytelling. What did you think about Sunspot, since we're talking about him, Gina?
Yeah, I mean, I liked him. I liked that, he took the role of Jubilee in the original, like both literally and figuratively, when he was running at the fence. I think that they featured him just enough. I think if they had him in there more, people would be like, why are we spending so much time with a new character that no one really knows yet? So I think they featured him just enough to keep old fans and new fans happy, without, with still giving him a background, making him the voice of the coming out story, because all of these old mutants that we knew had already, they were already in the pilot of the original. It's sort of Jubilee's foster parents who are like, come on, she's a mutant, like blah, blah, blah. And I do think that it's important to have that character who is not yet okay with themselves or their powers whose family is not yet okay with them or their powers. And I'm glad they gave it to a new character versus trying to be like, yeah, look, Jubilee's foster parents are back and they're pissed, like,
yeah, very much so.
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, they've changed their minds now. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Laura, to that point, obviously, there's been a lot of discussion about how, in so many ways, these X-Men stories work, because being a mutant is a metaphor for really so many different ways of being different, being outside of possibly the mainstream, whether it be minorities. I know that Bryan Singer isn't someone we speak about favorably usually, but his approach towards that first film was, obviously, it was like, oh yeah, if you take the word mutant and you replace it with gay, it's really that same story. And I think that that's when people started to understand that it's basically this idea that whether it's, racially, just sort of that idea of mutants being on the outside. How do you feel about that sort of aspect of the story and how it was represented throughout this season, Laura? I think she was just telling me about her new microphone. So it seems like the headphones might have popped out, but I'll ask you basically that same story, Gina, and we'll check back with Laura in a moment.
Yes. Could you just repeat that one?
Yeah.
One
No,
time?
just the idea, sort of what we were talking about, that you're saying Sunspot's sort of, that not comfortable being who he is. And I think that that's always one of the things about the X-Men that makes it work, is that idea that mutants is like any group that is on the outside.
Yeah. I think it is always important to have that character in X-Men, and also not just to have that represented, but also to see their journey. Because otherwise you're seeing mostly mutants who are okay with their powers, understand their powers, know who they are. I mean, not that they never waver, but having Sunspot in there is the easiest way to be like, hey, look at a character who's going to have an arc where he's like very much a mutant in the closet, and like, let's see how far he comes in the coming episodes / seasons.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Well, fortunately, Laura's back with us now, and it's. I was joking with Gina that the way that it works is, have you tried unplugging it and plugging it back in? And when that doesn't work, I'm like, I don't know. It's like, it's like Jerry Seinfeld talking about opening up the hood of a car and like looking at it, and he's like, if there's not a giant light switch that says on off, I don't really know what to do. But in any case, Laura, back to the issue at hand. I wanted to get your thoughts. One, from the enjoyment level, but also sort of analytically, this idea of the way that mutants are portrayed throughout this entire 10-episode season as being an allegory for people on the outside, whether it's minorities or gender identity or sexual orientation or any of those things.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that was done really well here, as Gina was talking about, was Sunspot's coming out story. We saw the tension there, the nerves of actually talking to his mother, the kind of like I knew already vibes that you get in a lot of those stories, especially in the queer community. But then also the lack of actual understanding of what it meant or what kind of support he needed and things of that nature. But I do think that was done really well and really compassionately. I also think that the entire series has taken on kind of issues around race rather well. There's this clear falling back to acts that are considered anti-mutant or could be considered to be racist in our world if we're putting that lens on it. And it's commentary that I think needs to happen right now, especially in the state of the world we're living in, where there are encampments all over and genocides happening and rights falling apart in various places. But yeah, it was very, very much done well, and I think timely to comment on the nature of society at the moment.
Right. I do think it's very much in line with a lot of what people are thinking about and concerns they have, and I think a lot of that comes from the man who was at the top this season, Bo DeMeo, who we know has been replaced during the second season. But he, as the season went along, he started chiming in more, giving more insight. And the one of the most fascinating things that we read on an earlier episode of the show was his account of that episode 5. That to him, Genosha was an allegory for the Pulse nightclub where there was the massacre, really, in Orlando, Florida, a few years back. And it was just like, oh, everything was so happy, it was so vibrant, and he wanted to have that contrast. And the fact is that he, right in the middle of an animated series, he basically gave the X-Men a 9/11 for a comparison that we definitely saw in that episode. It was a Holocaust. We saw a lot of comparisons, and it's such a deep thing to drop in there. I think that I believe I spoke with each of you after that. It was very shocking that we went that route, and I think that people in general like the whole first season, but it seems like that's still those moments are what everybody's talking about. What do you think, Gina, about having something with just so much weight? The second half of that episode, where the first half is like, oh, everything looks kind of great here. Look at how much fun the mutants are having.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think we all sort of knew something was coming. Anytime on a show like this where everything is happy, you're like, well, not gonna last. So yeah, I think they delivered perfectly. Even though we saw it coming, it was delivered well and written well, and it did sort of serve its purpose, which was obviously to be like, yay, like, look, they're doing it, and then to be like, you ripped it all away, even with like characters that no one really cared about in quite a while, like Callisto or Leech or something. I think it was very effective the way it was done. I think the voice acting was super effective. It was storyboarded really well. I think it was awesome.
I was probably most upset about Leech because I was convinced that Magneto and Gambit were going to come back, and I was half right. But the thing that blew my mind is I was like, are they going to start doing, the Krakoa storyline here to bring these characters back? And as of now, Gambit is still dead, but judging from that after credits scene in episode 10, he'll be back, but a little differently. What are your thoughts on basically the same thing, Laura? Sort of, taking some very serious real world themes. And, we've talked a lot about on this show over the last few months, how yes, this show is very much reaching out towards people who liked the original series, people who are not necessarily children, but you still want to be able to watch it with kids in the room. And then this happens in the middle of the season.
Yeah. So I was watching this with my partner and my son, and it felt like episodes like this were a really good way of kind of bridging that nostalgia between bringing in these new people, giving them kind of enough fun stuff to look at and to get them engaged with the story, but then also creating these like intergenerational conversation pieces. Because we had all sorts of really great conversations with my son over the past 12 weeks now. He's still talking about the show every day and has rewatched several episodes now, about the way that what we watched was impacting the world that is today. And that includes that episode where you kind of had a conversation about how things can just kind of go up in a day, and hopefully it never happens to us and all of those things, but it is something that people experience around the world all the time, and it's why we have to be sympathetic to refugees and aware of what's going on in our society and all of those things. And I think without those episodes, you wouldn't get quite the same bridging moments. There's so many shows that I just watch by myself, or that my son just watches himself, and there isn't a lot of conversation that can happen. Whereas with this, it creates a like family-wide conversation.
And just for context, how old is your son, and do they have a favorite member of the X-Men?
My son just turned 9 this past weekend, so that's where he's at age-wise. And his favorite member of the X-Men right now is Wolverine, because I feel like that's every 9-year-old's favorite. Like,
I mean,
think
I
that's
still
the
have
only
a
option
9-year-old
I got.
inside of me that he'll always be my favorite. Kitty was who I always identified with, and I sort of appreciated the different layers of storytelling throughout her tenure as a character. But Wolverine was always who I liked to watch. Like the body count in Wolverine #1 of the ongoing series, where I believe they bragged in the promotional materials that he's going to kill 125 people. I think I was 11 when that came out. I was like, sign me up. That's what I want.
Right?
Yeah. My son's about to be 9 actually this summer, and he turns 9 on the day Deadpool and Wolverine come out. And I just was like, that's not for you though.
No,
I have to at least see it
you.
first, but I'm pretty sure it's not for you. Yeah. And, in our previous episode, I talked to Jordan Bloom, who he watches the show with his kids. And I think it definitely works on that level where it doesn't, the sort of the far end of animation for adults is Invincible on Amazon, which I even if my son's an adult, I don't want to sit and watch that with him. And just it'll make me too uncomfortable. It'd be worse than watching any slasher movie. It's like I'd rather watch all the Friday the 13th movies with my son than watch Invincible, like pull a guy's heart out and show it to him as he's dying. I just don't need it. But so I think that they're very cognizant of that storytelling and, sort of very aware of all the people in the audience and telling these stories that I think relate to them. And, one of the things that I know you focus on, Laura, and it came up the last time we talked about it, is obviously queer LGBTQ representation in some of these shows. And I think it was very important that Beau DeMayo took the time to clarify to us that moment when Morph turns into Jean Grey and he says, "I love you." He's just like, yeah, just in case you didn't get it. Morph was confessing romantic feelings for Logan. And, it's an interesting workaround. He's basically, well, I guess I see I've already misspoken. They are a non-binary character, which I think wherever the thinking went into to have Morph be non-binary is like, oh yeah, this is a character who can change literally everything about who they are at any moment. It would probably make sense that this would be I would say our first non-binary member of the X-Men. And I know it's more incremental little moments, as you talked about, how there wasn't that much of him. What did you think about how they portrayed that and that maybe they took these baby steps? It seemed like you wanted more of him, but what did you think about what we did get of Morph on this season?
Yeah, so I would have loved to see more. I did like what we got. I do think it fell into the typical trap that anything that is like big name production falls into, where it takes baby steps that are so small that if you don't have the input from one of the creators, you don't really know whether or not it happened. Because there's that plausible deniability there where it could have just have easily been him pretending to be Jean and making fun of the little love triangle that goes on between Jean Scott and Logan. And we get clarity that it was really more of kind of using this as kind of a mask to express his own feelings or their own feelings. But it could have been done more blatantly potentially, and it is just that like little micro, I'm not even sure it's a baby step, it's just a nudge in the right direction more than it is
right.
a full step, right?
It's like a flinch where you're about to walk, and I think that I think that it sort of leads to this sort of interesting conversation of like, okay, they're cognizant of it, they're trying to do something, and especially Disney has certainly gotten some negative reactions, like the Buzz Lightyear movie that came out a few years ago. There was a same-sex female couple at the center of that, and there's always going to be backlash to things like that. I believe that there were countries that didn't show the movie and sort of standing by it. And then there's always the question of, well, you could have done more. and so it's hard to figure out where that line is. I know Bodemeo isn't really doing interviews and things. He's just sort of tweeting about it. I would love to know if he can one day maybe write a book or something. Was there more? Was he hoping for more? Maybe whenever we get season 2, maybe we'll see like, okay, they took much bigger steps. But I as I saw that tweet that I just shared a moment ago, Laura, I thought of how I'm like, well, I know I'm going to talk to Laura again, so I want to make sure that we get to this because it was something that came up previously. Gina, I kind of want to get your thoughts on the same thing. Having I can't think of another non-binary superhero character. I mean, from sort of X-Men extended universe, North Star from Alpha Flight was identified as gay at one point, and we started to get a little bit more after that. But in this era, these 90s era, the era where I was, poring over these comics every month, it was way more subtle than even this. What did you think about sort of that representation throughout this first season, Gina?
Yeah, I mean, I think as someone who's written for a Disney show and knows what their edicts are, I think even, Morph seeing a vision of Wolverine in the shower, a naked Wolverine in the shower and getting taunted and it being like, hey, clearly you want to hit that, Morph. And I think, for a character that was created essentially for a pilot as a new character to be killed off in the original, and then Eric and Julia Lewald were told like, well, you've got to bring them back now. We know you wanted them dead, but yeah, I think we saw everyone collectively on Twitter lose their goddamn minds when a character who can change gender at will was revealed to be a character that is genderless. Yeah. I think the horny Wolverine in the shower moment, I think to me, even just the looks they were giving Wolverine throughout the entire series, which were clearly like horny, I wish I could hit that looks. To me, I think it hit the mark in a way that kept Disney from being banned in certain countries. Just knowing the edicts that they have behind the scenes and knowing how you can't, especially for animation, you can't be shown in certain markets. Not that you should be held hostage by what other countries and other markets are saying, but there's a lot that goes into it. So I think that they showed quite a lot, and also very clearly the show is written by a gay man when you have Magneto splayed out in a Speedo. So yeah, I think it was truly one of the gayest in a good way. Right. Animated shows that I've seen Disney delve into, or any of the other big animation studios, to be honest.
Well, I think that's a testament to where we are in 2024 as opposed to the actual year 1997. Because if you were to have said this is the gayest animated superhero series I've ever seen, someone would assume you were trying to say something negative. But in this case, it's actually very positive. And sort of the point I was trying to make earlier, not reflecting toward his personal life in the years after. That's why I felt like Bryan Singer was the perfect filmmaker to take on the 2000 version of it, because he understood sort of that allegory. And I think that and then I'm going with my thoughts. Here's the thing. These are my thoughts from 2000. We can talk about him after the fact, but and that second one is still, I feel like, one of the best movies they've made. But the point I was going to make earlier about the movies is that I think the best of those movies are the X2 and Days of Future Past, but also these 10 episodes for me are better than all the movies. There's good things in a lot of those movies, have really great scenes, good interactions, wonderful characters, Dougray Scott falling out as Wolverine and hiring Hugh Jackman as one of those great Hollywood stories that we'll hear about forever, because just imagine if, I'm sure Hugh Jackman would have found his way to something. So as much as I love some of those movies and really hate other ones, this is so much better than that, is my point, and it's and people are talking about it in a way that they haven't talked about anything Marvel. I've asked everybody that I've talked to about it. It feels like there hasn't been this much agreement since Avengers Endgame. Everything's been divisive in one way or another. People are disappointed. And again, some of it rightly so. So having two female co-hosts on this episode, I wanted to specifically ask your thoughts. We've spoken about some female characters, and I want to know, Gina, if you particularly have one who you felt like they did a wonderful job with. Maybe you were impressed by. There's a lot to choose from, but I'm wondering which of the female characters on the show you felt like this was the perfect season for that character.
Yeah, I mean they were all wonderful, I think, but for me, Rogue's arc of I think in the original series we knew about her dark background. There's an entire episode devoted to her putting Ms. Marvel in a coma. But the Rogue that we saw 99% of the time was, all quippy one-liners and Southern charm. And in this one, she goes to a really dark place, and I love it. I think it gave Lenore Zahn something, the voice actor who plays Rogue, something to really like sink her teeth into. I think even just seeing the relationship with her and Magneto, the relief of finding someone that she can actually has figured out how to touch, but it not being the person that she really wants to touch. But I think all of that, and then thinking she lost sort of the two men in her life simultaneously, and then finding out one came back, but it wasn't the right one. I just think her arc was really wonderful, and I think it does sort of remind us that she did kind of start out as a villain in her younger days. Something that like X-Men Evolution, which I've been rewatching as well, like also did well. But yeah, it showed sort of the darkness within her and how that can go horribly wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they did a great job, but I was really impressed with her. And there are some of those moments where they wanted you to understand, like Thunderbolt Ross saying, like, relax, this bunker is designed to withstand the Hulk. And then she punches her way into it, and, just sort of the retribution of angry Rogue. And, she lets go of Trask and he falls to his death. And that's sort of a divisive moment. And Wolverine's like, yeah, she did what we all should have done. You know what I mean? So I love having the character be that big, that front and center. It's a very complicated character that I think is so well written over the, I don't know, what is it at this point, 44 years since she first appeared, to have that ability to take people's powers, but then also like their memories lingering and things like that. Laura, how did you feel about Rogue? And let me know if there's another female character that you want to speak to their journey throughout these 10 episodes.
Yeah, so I was also very much in love with Rogue's journey. I think when we last talked, I was a little bit hesitant about where she was because I'm like, either this is going to go really well or really horribly, and I'm not sure which, and I don't want to speak to it yet. But I was very, very happy with the way that landed. I am glad that she got as dark as she did. I'm glad we got to see that side of her, and that we got to see her do the morally gray things that she's really known for, especially in the comics. She's always this kind of in-between complex character. And overall, I think, especially for 10 episodes, they did a really great job of making almost all the characters wildly complex. There wasn't anyone that I wasn't at times like questioning their judgment or wondering whether or not they were making the right call or having like mixed feelings about whether or not I was supporting that character. And so I just think that's especially impressive in not even like in a 10 episode arc.
Yeah, just to interject on that real quick, not on my bingo card for the season was touching on the Rogue Nightcrawler sibling relationship. I just wouldn't have imagined there was any time for that, but they found time for it, and I thought it was great. It's one of many things that I love about Kurt Wagner is his relationship with some of his teammates and other family members. But was there someone else you wanted to speak to beyond Rogue, though, Laura?
Yeah, beyond Rogue, I really enjoyed the overall arc with Jean Grey and how complex that got. Like the re-finding of yourself, the redefinition of even what their family looked like, and figuring out her relationship with Nathan, like navigating the complexity of all of that, I think was done astoundingly well and really took my breath away.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and it's such a complicated, and they dove right into the Madeline Pryor and the brief appearance of Madeline as the Goblin Queen,
Yes.
and Nathan's understanding is like, well, this isn't my mother, Madeline's my mother, and just sort of those questions. Like, there's that moment when Sinister's like, "Do you want me to tell you when I switched you?" And I'm like, me as the audience, yeah, I kind of do actually. But I also know, I understand. It's like Peter Parker doesn't need to know if he's a clone or not. He knows he's the real Peter Parker. P.S. Turns out you were actually the clone, sucker. But anyway, there's a 20-year long con of Peter Parker. But I think that it is so complicated, and Jean is such a complicated character. One of my only criticisms on the season, it was the way that the Phoenix Force kind of shows up just to help solve a problem and then leaves so it can't help the next problem. I think it was explained away okay. It was like, well, she had a little bit of it and it didn't want her to die, and then it left for real. So neither of you have to agree, but what did you think about sort of the usage of the Phoenix Force to sort of solve the as Star Trek fans would look at it, the Kobayashi Maru, that sort of no-win scenario that she was in, and then Phoenix shows up and is like, okay, well, now we fixed it. What did you think, Gina?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm easier to please maybe than both of you, because I feel like I'm just generally positive about this show.
Sure.
But yeah, we were waiting for the Phoenix Force to show up. I know I was like, I know Phoenix Force is going to show up. And I thought it was a great moment to do that. And the fact that, Jean Grey, this descendant of Sinister's wife, essentially is the one that strips away all of all of these evil experiments that he's done. I enjoyed seeing that. I think I don't need too much Phoenix Force. I think, we had so much in the original series. Right. That to me, it was just like a little amuse-bouche of Phoenix Force, and I appreciated that.
Yeah, no. And again, it was when you look at other Marvel entries on Disney Plus, I might have had a few more complaints about, say, Secret Invasion, but we don't need to talk about that. This was really the one where I was like, oh, it was. You know what it was? It was more disappointed because I'm like, man, it's so cool when she's Phoenix. I would have kind of liked to have seen more of it, but I do understand sort of how it happened, and if it hadn't happened in that way, then we'd be talking about like, yeah, I kind of would have liked to have seen Phoenix at some point, wouldn't you? So
yeah, I mean, I'll also say, like, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to think that one of the world's most powerful psychics, who has been portrayed as having a psychic connection with Scott and with others, also has a psychic connection with this force that spent many months inside of her. And that then it because this was how the Phoenix Force first felt human emotions, would want to protect her. So yeah, and I also think, as someone who's like written for 11-minute animation and 22-minute animation, I think it's hard to, in 10 episodes of this show, squeeze in everything everyone wants. Like, I know some people were like, why isn't there more Wolverine? Why isn't there more like Emma Frost? Why aren't we? And it's like, what do you want? Like, do you want, like, you basically want 100 hours of content, because writers can't cram in all of these. So I think I am pretty forgiving and pretty positive about the things that writers go through to try and keep everything happy. I think this show came as close to it as is possible with the time constraints.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It brings me to something else, but I didn't know, Laura, if you wanted to chime in on the brief appearance, the cameo of the Phoenix Force.
I was really happy with the cameo of the Phoenix Force as well. Like, I think it was just enough to kind of tick the box and say that we'd done it, but not so much that it prevented any of the other characters from showing what they could do. Like if Phoenix Force had shown up any sooner, we wouldn't have gotten to see how epic Jubilee was in a battle, you know? And if the Phoenix Force has stuck around after, then like what is there to cliffhang into the second season? Like we need there to still be some conflict and things to work out. And I really think it was a good way of ticking that box and satisfying the nostalgia and everything without having it overpower the season.
Yeah, and speaking of the Phoenix Force, one of the ways that the season ends is we see way in the future representation of the clan Askani. It's tough sometimes. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it because it's something you read as a kid, and I'm like, well, I think I know how to pronounce it. And sometimes you realize like, oh, I was way off. But anyway, the clan Askani. So that shows us that we're going to get someone else who was an embodiment of the Phoenix Force at one point, Rachel Summers, who is another character that I enjoyed during my run of reading comics. And interestingly, three of my most favorite characters ended up in Excalibur at one point, which became the fun X-Men book because the real X-Men book was so dark and serious. What do you think, Laura, sort of looking ahead and what we might get from Rachel, what we might get from, what we know of the way that future has been told in comics and what we might see next year? Or next season, which is not next year, probably like maybe the end of next year, but maybe 2026 as well. Yeah, I don't know. Wait, Gina, you worked in animation. We shouldn't expect to see this in less than a year and a half, probably 2 years, right?
The fact that they had started writing the episodes before season 1 aired, I think is promising. I mean, obviously in animation, the actual animation is what takes the longest. But the fact that most of season 2 was already written before season 1 even came out, I think Marvel knows it has something good. So I would wager we do see it towards the end of next year.
All right, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Thank you for spoon feeding me exactly what I wanted to hear. But back to my question from a moment ago, Laura. What do you hope we see sort of the future storyline that we saw in the cliffhanger?
Yeah. I am not entirely sure if there's anything I'm hoping for specifically because there's so many storylines to potentially choose from in that, right? I am more than anything hoping that we get to see the complex relationships that have been started throughout kind of play out a little bit more. I'm really interested to see where things with Scott and Jean go as life develops for them and as they continue to kind of navigate the fallout of everything that happened this season. And I'm very intrigued to see what Rogue healing from all the damage she experienced this season looks like more than anything else. I love all of like kind of the Days of Future Past and everything like that in terms of the comics front. And I don't think there's anything specifically where I'm like, they have to do this storyline. I'm just excited to see what they feed me.
Right. And, I think, let me know if you agree, Gina. I think Rogue is probably going to finally, heal as best she can and start to come around. And then Gambit's going to show up as one of the Horsemen of Apocalypse's death, which is, none too subtly alluded to in the finale. What are you thinking we might get to see? Obviously, Apocalypse, who we did see on the earlier version of the show, but they clearly have big plans for Apocalypse, for the clan of Skinny, and all these other things that were teased in the finale. What are your thoughts, sort of, about what could come next, Gina?
I like to go in without any expectations or without thinking, I hope I see this or I hope I see that, because usually what the writers are doing is better than what I would have imagined. But yeah, I like going in clean. I think I loved this season, so I just kind of want to see what I did think it was like obvious that they were clearly saving Apocalypse. Just the fact that they kept reminding us that he exists every time they showed Cable in the beginning with Apocalypse. It's like, remember this character that you haven't seen yet? So clearly it's going to be a big Apocalypse season who I love and love from the original series. So yeah, I think also they probably smartly saved a lot of the mind bending time travel for season 2. I think that they were like, look, some people are going to be watching this show for the first time. I know from like the breakdown on New Rockstars that I wrote of the original 5 seasons, that a lot of people went into this not know, like they're like, who's this character? What's going on? So I think they very smartly weren't like right out of the gate, like, oh, time travel, timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly stuff. Like for you, I think that they were like, yeah, we're going to win you over. And then we're going to do some weird shit. Hope you enjoy it. So I think they've earned our goodwill. So I'm going in just knowing that they earned goodwill and excited to see what they do.
Yeah, it was almost like, all right, Bishop, you're going to kind of go way on the back burner, but we'll get to you in season 2. In an earlier conversation, I sort of, as I was talking, I realized that one character I would love to see represented in a future season of this show is Legion. And, I think that Noah Hawley's live action series, I thought, did a great job of telling that story, but I would love to see just what you can do with animation, and just, you want to talk about the mind-bendiest of the mind-bendy characters. They didn't even really approach his multiple personalities on the live action series, so that's on my personal wish list, but I got so many more things. I feel greedy. It's almost like, a full Christmas tree laid out in front of you, and after you open your presents, you're like, yeah, but there's one more thing that I think I should have gotten, Santa. Where's David Holler? I want to deal with any of that. And but obviously everybody that you talk to that was a fan of the original series didn't feel like, this let them down. One of my regular co-hosts, David Brody, actually had never watched the original series, but he had read the comics through the early 80s. So I thought, he offered an interesting point of view, and he thought that the show was great, except for he had minor complaints. But I agree, Gina, listening to you talk is like, it's almost like, because I talk about a show like this so much, I feel like I need to find something, but there were not complaints as I was watching.
You don't need to find it.
Yeah,
enjoy it.
But
it's
again,
a lot of work to make a TV show. Just enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I know, and having living in a house with someone who has worked very hard on a number of TV shows, I try to take that into consideration, and just there are times sometimes where I'm like, well, maybe a couple people didn't work as hard as the rest, and that's not this show. That might be Secret Invasion. Yeah. Secret Invasion. I don't know what happened, but we're not here to talk about that. In fact, on our main show, I'm often told that we shouldn't say the name of it. It's the show that we shall not speak its name. But this is really the opposite of that, and that was about a year ago right now. So that's actually why I started thinking about that. That premiered like last June, and whereas like this summertime, late spring was like, oh my God, we loved the X-Men animated series, and they're not going to give us much until we get the Agatha Harkness series. Catherine Hahn's phenomenal. I think that it might be a minute or two later than people were expecting it, and now they're teasing the Vision Quest storyline, also kind of left over from WandaVision with Paul Bettany, and I'm excited for all of it. I do wonder sometimes, our audience's interest waning than if this had come in 2 or 3 years after WandaVision. And sort of our final thought, are you looking forward to one of those projects more than the other? I mean, there's plenty of other ones, but I'm specifically talking about Agatha, and the announcement of Vision Quest is kind of a recent one over the last couple of weeks, Gina.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Agatha. I think I've had more time to sort of wait and expect that. Whereas like the Vision Quest news was, I think, just came out yesterday, and I was like, oh, cool. But yeah, I can't wait for Agatha. I understand that like things, that timelines are wonky because of the writer's strike and everything. And the impending possible more strikes coming up.
Yes.
But yeah, hopefully that comes out before there's any more huge like interruptions.
Yeah, I know. I agree, and I'll kind of ask you the same thing, Laura. And sort of, is there anything that's coming up from Marvel that is something you're planning to watch with your son?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll watch it with my son, but I do plan on watching Vision Quest when it comes up. I was very excited to see that news yesterday. It's probably the thing that's on the horizon that I'm the most looking forward to. We're also going to be going back and watching all the old X-Men stuff with my son because he's gotten so into it that he needs like the entire backlog. And we went to like the comic book store and he bought a bunch of like old back issues that somebody had traded in and they were hugely beat up and what have you. So he is becoming quite the little X-Men comics expert, and I'm
Awesome.
a rather proud hippie mom. And
Yeah, that's awesome.
as a result of that, right? I feel like I'm winning.
It's one of those things that I think about that, you know, that's exactly how I would have been as a kid if there was that technology. But instead, it was like, you know, they started a series called Classic X-Men that started reprinting the new X-Men. And I was like, oh my God, I could finally read these stories because I could never afford them. And, you know, you always wanted to know so much. So there would be like the official handbook to the Marvel Universe with this like really small text that would tell you people. And I was like, I would pore over that stuff. And I'm like, boy, I sure would like to read one of those comics one day. And now there's, you know, so many great online resources, you know, Marvel has, but there's also more general comics. And you're like, oh, do you want every book we've published up until like 6 months ago? Yeah, go ahead. They're all here. And I'm just like, oh, I barely left the house as a kid as it was. if I was able to sit at a screen and like, hold on, I'm only on X-Men 49. All right. I'm not even to the new X-Men yet. So yeah, it seems like a great time. And do you think your son's going to get a chance to see Deadpool and Wolverine? Am I being too strict to my son by telling him that he can't see it? Jordan Bloom says he's taken his kid to see it. So.
I'm not sure I'm the person to ask because I'm weirdly anti-censorship. So my only rule is that if we go see something and he tells me he can't handle it, that we walk out.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's, by the way, that's very responsible. Instead of like, go to the lobby and get some more popcorn. I'll be out in an hour.
Yeah, exactly. But I do intend to take him to our local drive-in and see it because I find that's the best way to do like more potentially intense movies because then you can just turn off the volume and watch what's on the screen if you want, or it's easier and somewhat cheaper to just leave than a regular movie theater is. So that's my game plan for when it comes out.
Well, that's a great game plan. I'm not going to pass that along to my son because there are a few drive-ins not too far from here that I don't think he needs to know. But he'll have a happy birthday all the same. Well, it's wonderful getting to catch up with both of you again, and I hope before too long there's more great X-Men stuff to talk about. And Laura and I have had we've been trading messages about how. I think I'm mostly looking forward to this new Joker movie because I want your take on Harley Quinn, which I know that is a character that you've written about extensively. And apparently that movie's coming out in October. I blinked and I'm like, oh wait, it's actually fairly soon, you know?
Yeah, October. There's also the new Batman animated series that's coming out in August where they've completely restructured Harley Quinn's origin story in order to separate her from the Joker. So we got lots of things we can potentially talk about.
Wow. All right. Man, HBO Max really is the Godfather 3. Every time I think I've gotten out, they pull me back in, you know? I'm like, oh, Curb Your Enthusiasm's over? Okay, I'm done. And then there's always like something else. I'm like, oh yeah, I could get Dune 2. No. I gotta save it for other apps. Anyway, please, each of you, Gina first, let people know where they can find you, and if they'd like to keep the conversation going with what you shared on this show, where you can be found.
Yeah, I'm on all 9,000 existing social media sites at Gina Ippi. I forget that most of them exist.
Yeah, there was that moment where everybody was like, well, Twitter's going to go away. And this is not the show to make the argument as to whether or not it should have. But the fact that I'm saying that, I'll tell you something. But then because people were saying goodbye on Twitter at one point, and everybody's like, all right, I guess I have a Substack. I have a Blue Sky.
Everyone wanted to hang on to their username. So they were like, all right, Blue Sky, Threads. What else is there?
I have a Threads, and Instagram keeps letting me know that things are happening on Threads.
Yeah, every time you log into Instagram, they're like, "Hey, remember this?"
Yeah, it's my Mean Girl reference is that Threads is fetch for social media. Stop trying to make Threads happen. Right?
Yeah. I give it another year. I give it another year before it's dead.
I would love an alternative to Twitter, but it just seems to be where things are happening. So yes, people can find you there. there. And Gina, appreciate you coming back on. And Laura Grafton, where can people find you and some of the things that you've been writing about and talking about?
Yeah. So I'm at LL Grafton on all the places. I also forget most of them exist. My thesis work is also on quantifying Quinn on Instagram. So I toss up panels from some Harley Quinn stuff every once in a while and chat about it. And for the super academic comic scholars that might be listening, I'm actually presenting at the Canadian Comics Studies Conference in about the time that this podcast actually airs. So if you happen to be in Montreal attending that while you're listening to this, come find me.
Oh my gosh, what a great excuse to go to Montreal,
Right? Awesome.
And your colleague who referred you to me, Jonathan DeMann, I hope I said his name right. He was nominated for an award for his Claremont run study, and
Yes.
he will be on the next episode of this show, but he might not even know that yet. It was more of a general like, you're going to be on, and he's like, yeah, we'll talk after the season. And I'm fascinated by that notion, as I said in the beginning, of being somebody who does like comic book studies and just the depth. We did an episode where we talked to Jonathan about his book, and it was just like, here's the number of thought balloons that Wolverine has compared to Storm, and just like the fact that there's a team of people who did this stuff. I'm like, I didn't get to sign up for that because I would have done it, So,
yeah, but I'm basically doing something like that with character interactions in Harley Quinn right now. So it's counting all the times that Harley has talked to like every character she ever talked to and what that means for the relationship dynamic and how that overlays, or the fact that she always in the Mad Love storylines actually interacts with Poison Ivy before she interacts with Joker. Including in the People's Joker, Vera Drew's People's Joker that just came out recently, that kind of does a weird retelling of the Mad Love storyline, and Quinn and Ivy meet there first as well.
Oh my gosh. Well, I look forward to, finding out the final tally on all of that and talking to you down the road. And Gina, I will absolutely find an excuse to talk to you again before too long. But we appreciate it. Everybody knows where to find both of you now. You can find me on Twitter, at Instagram, and Threads for now at ChristianDMZ. Please like and subscribe. The Geekscape YouTube channel. We have a ton of great shows like this one. And wonderful content. And you can also get the audio version of this show. But that's all the time we have for now. As the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!